You know, I've been thinking a lot lately about the multiverse. Like, it's just a thing that we think about now. You know, it is a thing that I think that like Marvel really started to bring to light. Like even before the fucking Infinity Saga. I promise this isn't a vlog about Marvel, by the way. So if you like turn it on and you're like, I'm not interested in this, like what? Just hang on a second. It's not going to be about Marvel, I promise. But like I do think that Marvel really reintroduced the concept into the public consciousness. I think they started to do that like even before the new like post Thanos era or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I just it's always been an interesting concept to me, like even before that. But I feel like people really started to think about it more because now it's sort of in the public eye. I think really with like the Spider-Man No Way Home movie, people really started to think about it. Like what's different, you know, between these universes, and like what if it was about you? That's the point I'm getting at. Like, I don't know. I keep thinking about it. Like, and I find the concept so worked into my own thoughts, that it's actually kind of silly. Because I'll just be doing something, you know, and I'll be like watching the news or something, and I'll be like, huh, I'd like to see the alternate timeline, I'd like to see a glimpse of the universe where I'm a marine biologist or some shit like that. Like, there's just any kind of like, you could make. There's literally an infinite number of stories that you could make based on the idea of the multiverse, but like also just alternate realities, which I think are alternate realities or alternate universes, which is another fictional, very internet-like concept that I think. Is a little bit overlooked these days in favor of having them be a part of a larger multiverse, which is, you know, for better or for worse in fiction. But it's very interesting to think about in terms of my own life. Like, man, all the things you could have been, all the people you could have been, all the varying degrees of things, all the things you thought you would be. It's like all of that has to be a part of the multiverse, right? Like, there has to be a different timeline for every decision you've made or didn't make, or like all of the branching paths from that decision, and also an infinite number of universes concerning the things that you didn't do or that aren't your fault or part of your whatever, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, hey, there's that one alternate universe where I got into a car crash when I was 16 and a bunch of weird shit happened, you know? There's an alternate universe for me not only getting into a relationship with each and any of the girls that I liked in high school, but there's an alternate timeline for like every single decision made in any of those potential relationships. It's leading to an alternate timeline where, like, yeah, I guess there was an alternate timeline where I married that one girl from ninth grade that didn't like me very much. There has to be, you know what I mean? Or you can jump into the multiverse and look at all the alternate timelines and realize you ain't never had a chance for that girl, you big dumb. It's just like, it is very interesting to think about. In particular with me, it's always interesting looking at my shortcomings and all of the things that I thought I would be. Like, there's got to be an alternate timeline where I actually did become like a movie director, or or if you want to like break it down really close to our actual timeline, there was a timeline where I showed a story to somebody and they were like, this is really fucking good, you should do more of it, and then I wrote more of it because like that was a really big deflating moment in my life, actually, was when I finally finished like a book, right? And then no one fucking read it. And I sent it to friends, and I was like, please read this. It'll be awesome. You know, I want to know how I did. I feel like it's good. I finished this. I did this. This was great. This was me. And then nobody fucking actually read it. Which was a huge blow to my ego. And it was right at the time when I was getting out of college and realizing that my life was not about to go the way that I thought it was going to go and had thought it was going to go until, like, you know, since forever. So yeah, that was a big blow. But there's an alternate universe out there where somebody read it and was like, this is my favorite book ever, please keep writing it. please edit it. I will literally help you find an editor, and it will all be like there's that alternate universe, and it's like, I don't know. There's just a lot of them to think about, and it's a very interesting topic. And look, there are some people who maybe are watching this and are movie buffs and are like, "Hey, you should watch Everything Everywhere All at Once. Isn't that what that movie's about?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but I ain't seen it yet." So full disclosure, I'm talking about this, but I haven't seen it yet. And it's just interesting to me that like Marvel has not really tapped into the. Well, I mean, it's not a big surprise considering they do big epic superhero movies, but it is interesting that people talk about the multiverse in like an exclusively big epic sort of way, right? It's kind of like it's almost disappointing in a way that people don't look at or at least media doesn't really look at the small ways in which the multiverse could be applied, because there's just so many different things, right? I guess it's kind of like the butterfly effect in that way. I guess really, like, when you think about it, sometimes multiverse is just like, oh yeah, it's just the butterfly effect, but indifferent. But that's what's so interesting about it. You know what I mean? That's so interesting. That's what's cool about it. Like, it's like we always thought of our lives in terms of this, but now we think of our lives in terms of like all of those timelines being real. I mean, unless you're boring and are like, oh, it's fiction, I don't care. But like, I think one of the ideas that is so pervasive about like the idea of the multiverse is that it can be real. It's like one of those concepts where it's like it can be real because you can't really prove otherwise. Like, it's like it can be real, but we don't really have the the technology to do anything with or to prove that. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those pseudosciences that's like, all right, well, we haven't necessarily proven it's not real yet, because we just don't have the ability to see into other times and other multiverses or whatever, or universes rather. But like, it's yeah, but like, it's so it still feels kind of real, like as a fictional concept, and I think that's one of the reasons why people really like it, and why it's like so appealing to people. And I don't know, I just think it's I think that part of it is interesting too, and it makes it appealing because it's like, here's this thing that you can apply to everyday life, as I have, and you can kind of feed off of it. But yeah, it's a shame that we don't see many more stories like that. But again, with as far as being like a small scale sort of thing, like, I don't know. I think media has covered alternate timelines somewhat thoroughly. I mean, you really don't see a whole lot of movies about that. Like I said, sometimes it's in the guise of like, the butterfly effect. But I think the difference between something like the butterfly effect and like the multiverse is like in the multiverse, all of those timelines run parallel. There's not just one. It's like at any point you could discover the loophole. Talking about like butterfly effect, the movie, just as an example, because I know like the butterfly effect is just like a thing in fiction. But yeah, like in that movie, right? So he could have found a loophole where it's like, yeah, you can also bring yourself from a different timeline into like this timeline, and then there's two of you that does things and it affects one or the other, which is honestly, that does sound really confusing. It's probably better they didn't do that, but like, if you want a good story about that, go watch Doctor Who: A Christmas Carol. That was actually really awesome. But again, it's like, that's kind of the difference between like, just like the butterfly effect happens on a single timeline that loops back on itself, but like the multiverse is like all those timelines like running parallel to another. I like how I'm like, this is just like, it's just fun to talk about. Like, this is a rambly blog and it sounds stupid, and like everyone's like, what the fuck are you talking about at this point? And it's like, it doesn't fucking matter. It's the multiverse. Dude, fucking, why don't you just jump over to the multiverse where you paid attention, you dumb. I'm really good at insults. You know what I'm saying? I never want to go too hard on an insult because I'm afraid that people will not like me if I do that even jokey, but I also just don't feel like dumb is enough. uh, anyways, yeah, so I don't know. It's just like, it is something that I think about, and it is interesting how, like, since like 2021, the concept of the multiverse has worked its way into my psyche, where it is like a lot of like, oh yeah, I'd like to see the alternate timeline where this, or which again isn't really multiverse. It's alternate timeline, which maybe this video is about alternate timelines, but I don't know. I've always found the concept pretty interesting, especially as someone who, like, man, I live in literally like the least interesting timeline of my life possible, it feels like. So it's yeah, it's a little boring sometimes, it's a little frustrating. And it's a nice fantasy to be able to look into the multiverses and be like, oh yeah, there were ones where I was successful. But in that vein, I've also found that, like, the concept of the multiverse is kind of depressing in a way, in a lot of ways actually, because you're always, when you think about yourself in the multiverse, you're always thinking about the things that could have been. You're always thinking about the different versions of you, and none of those versions of you exist. Like, none of those are the ones that you have to live with. And I feel like a lot of the times we always think about, like, oh yeah, in this type of version of the multiverse, I'd be like super successful, or in this version, I would be, someone, more important than I am, or I would be, I don't know, just someone like slightly different. And I find myself thinking about that a lot. I think one of the unfortunate things about, like, alternate realities and, like, thinking about the multiverse, right, is one. Let me start over. I think one of the man, I started thinking about other. I started thinking about other things in the middle of that sentence. It's been happening lately. Anyways, yeah, I think what was I saying? Man, my brain just farted big. Okay, let's move on then. Yeah, it's kind of depressing when you think about, okay, well, there's all these better versions of myself, and here I am. I'm the worst one thinking about, like, all of the other multiverse versions of myself. And then, yeah, okay, I remembered it. Thinking about the multiverse is the most escapist form of fantasy, because you're literally, like, tethering it to reality, but you're like, oh man, let me just, it's just another word to justify, like, your regrets, in a way, I think, in a human non-superhero sort of context. And that's kind of sad that we think about it so much now. I think one of the big reasons why the idea of a multiverse is so prevalent in today's society is because it is that escapist, and people really want an escape. People really want to see, like, the way the world would go differently if different things happen. Like, people are very interested in that. We talk, we live in an age where, like, history is at our fingertips, and we can look at history, and a lot of people, like, rail against history now. People are like, this version of history is shitty, and it's full of shitty things, and we're shitty. Like, we've ended up in, like, this shittiest timeline. That's a comment you see on, like, any video or any news story ever. It's like, oh, we truly live in the shittiest timeline. And it's like, yeah, that's interesting. But I think that's one of the reasons why it is so prevalent. I think people want to be able to look at life and go, okay, well, there's a way humanity could have worked out a lot better. There's a way in particular that my life could have worked out a lot better, or a lot worse, but maybe better, or, like, So I think that's one of the reasons why it's so prevalent. We live in a bit of a crap saccharine. No, not even crap saccharine. We kind of live in a bad timeline right now. We're kind of not optimistic about the future or anything right now. So I think the idea of a multiverse is appealing. The idea of maybe getting help from other versions of ourselves, whether it be for uh, personal reasons or for larger like humanity saving reasons. I think that is a concept that is very appealing right now, and I get it. I get why it's popular. Also, just from a narrative perspective, like, and certainly from a comic book perspective, it is interesting to have several versions of the same character. It is incredibly fun to just come up with a character whose concept is being in the multiverse and having different versions of themselves. I kind of already do that because, like, I just like to put my characters in different situations like that. Um, so, you just, I get why it's very interesting narratively, but it also makes me feel like narratively it's even kind of depressing because it means we've run out of ideas in this universe that now we have to introduce all these other things. Like, it's pretty crazy, like, to look at something like, Across the Spider-Verse, which I also haven't seen. I saw Into the Spider-Verse, but, like, and, like, that's the next thing. Like, I think I almost feel like maybe that's one of the issues with the new Marvel stuff is that, like, they jumped too quickly into multiversal war. Like, I think one of the reasons why Thanos was cool was because he was he was like merely an intergalactic threat, but not like a crazy like universal level thing, although he did do like a universal thing. But like the story didn't feel universal because it was still mostly centered around the effects that it had on Earth, which I think was, I mean, that was the move obviously, but like it's yeah, it's kind of a shame that they didn't try to do something only slightly bigger for the next phase of things, and it's all falling apart now because they couldn't maintain the sense of scale. It's out of control. Like, once you introduce the multiverse, it's like you gotta be ready for all that shit, and I don't know that they were frankly. I don't know. I think sometimes the smaller sort of multiverse alternate timelines are very underrated as a story concept, and I kind of wonder if maybe we would see more like indie films about that kind of thing happening at some point. Like, you just have like conversations with your alternate timeline selves. I mean, I think that would be pretty cool. Hell, I think anybody could make that video. Just like plop yourselves down, or like do a different shot with you in a different outfit, and like just kind of have a conversation. I pretty much do that like just on my own. I got a whole multiverse inside my head. Like, it is amazing to me though. Like, think about this for a second. Let's end this on a high note, right? Like, it is pretty amazing to me though that like we can think of the idea of multiple universes together. Like, we can have this idea of a multiversal war, or like, here's all of me from all of the timelines, like everything possible, right? And all of that can still exist within the bounds of the human imagination. Like, think about it. Like, the human imagination is big enough to not only conceive of the idea of a multiverse, but to flesh it out. And maybe not go through all of the possibilities, because our brains are smarter than to know that would, our brains are smart enough to know that is asinine and stupid and nobody would enjoy that, and that's not the point of it. But, like, you can fit an entire multiverse in your brain. And then some. And then you can fit multiple multiverses in your brain, because you can have a multiverse for everything. Like, every different world and thing that you can create, you can, like, you can have that. So it's all, it's all in our imagination. And our imagination is powerful enough to generate that concept and populate it with characters and different versions of these characters. And we can use our knowledge of the human experience in order to inform these different versions of these characters, and how sometimes your life can be changed by one small thing. Like, it's really fucking rad that the human imagination can do that sort of thing. It's really cool. You know, like, no matter how large the multiverse is, our brains can think of more. You know, our brains can create more. That's cool. All is to basically say, suck it, AI.